A number of years ago, I was traveling to a Christian convention and was driving through Savannah, Georgia. And night got to be a little later night, and a little later night, and then Savannah was still about 20, 30 miles away. But you know, big town, just gonna have hotel space. So as I pulled into town, I began to drop off, and pulled off an exit, and went to the nearest hotel, and it was a name I recognized, and they were full. Okay. Went to the next hotel, and they were full. And they said, better go down a few more exits. So I went on through Savannah, got to the far side, and pulled off an exit, and they were full. And I finally, after the fourth hotel, said, what in the world is going on that all these hotels are full? Well, evidently there was a Harley-Davidson convention, and it booked out the whole city. So I kept on driving, got a couple more exits out of town, and pulled off, and they said, we're full, that one's full, but if you go about a mile up the road, there's a little inn. They've got one room left. And right then I saw another car pulling in the lot behind me. So I ran out, got in my car, and went down the mile, and I pulled off at the little Magnolia Inn. And it was not great. You know, the sign was mostly lit. And when I went into the lobby, they had a screen door, like that we would have on a house. When I got through the screen door, it slammed behind me. And I thought, not great. And the office there was not great. And they sent me to the last room, and the room was not great. As a matter of fact, I would say it was not good. I mean, the walls had lots of different colors on them, some intentional and some not. And the bathroom had one of those mold issues where you just thought, if I had a tube of caulk and some bleach, I could really do good stuff here. And then I fought off the urge to run to another exit and find a Walmart. But so I went to bed, and I got up in the morning, and I noticed that the towels were hung not quite straight, and then realized they were damp. And the carpet was kind of like one grade up from AstroTurf, and it was damp. Now, it was Savannah, Georgia. There's humidity there, but I thought, it's a place I don't think I want to go back. Given a choice, so what would it take for someone to go back to a place they don't want to go back to?
Get the Harley Rider
Don't even think of it.
You know what's funny is in the last week I had two friends show me the brand new Harleys they bought. I want us to take a look at Luke chapter 17. And I'm going to pick up verses 11 through 19, and it's a story you probably are very familiar with. It's a story when the 10 lepers are cleansed. I'm going to read through that and just kind of touch base again on what it means to go back to a place you don't want to go back to. Again, Luke chapter 17, verses 11 through 19. Now, on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. He was going into a village. 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance, and they called out in a loud voice, Jesus, Master, have pity on us. When he saw them, he said, go show yourselves to the priests. And as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back, praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet, and he thanked him, and he was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except for this foreigner? Then he said to him, rise and go. Your faith has made you well. He remembered where he came from, because he went back there, right? Now, I don't know what you know about leprosy, or at least first century understanding of leprosy. Most commonly we would call it today Hansen's disease. And Hansen's has been almost completely eradicated. But it came with a physical and a social stigma. It had a disintegration of flesh and eventually muscle and then bone. And it was truly, you were living a life as a walking dead person. You were dying every moment. It was highly contagious in some forms. And they did live in communities outside the towns. That was the rule. They had to live outside the town or outside the city gate. And you can see even in this story, as Jesus arrives in the village, they are outside, and they stood at a distance and called out to him. They were following the right rules, by the way. When you had leprosy, You had to wear torn clothes so it would be visible from some distance that you were a leper. You also had to call out at a safe distance that you were a leper. And they had called out. They were living the rules on the borderlands. Interesting that Jesus was walking the border between Samaria and Judea, because that's where Samaritans lived, of course. And they were the bad guys as far as the Jews were concerned. And as far as the Samaritans were concerned, the Jews were the bad guys. There was a long-standing rivalry between the two that goes all the way back to the Old Testament. But these walking dead, these 10, no jobs, their families would have been nowhere near contact with them, and they only had fellowship with others who were dying. That's their band and their group. So they call out. And we don't really know what that life is like, because we don't have anything in our culture that quite reaches this extreme. I would say if you went back 30 or 35 years ago, the closest parallel you could get is as AIDS was arriving in America and people were afraid to touch anyone and keep that distance. That's about the closest stigma that we would have in our somewhat modern culture. But these people were sick and dying, slowly and painfully, and couldn't be around the people that loved them, and they couldn't be around the people they loved. Why would you ever go back to a place like that? And yet, he does. It's horrible. You'd have to have a really good reason to go back to a place of horrible, right? I'm not going back to Magnolia Inn. I'll keep driving. If need be, I may doze in my car. There'd have to be a really good reason to go back to this place where he was willing to go back to. One thing is, obviously, he remembered who sent him free. Not just set him free, but sent him free. He knew where Jesus had been, and once he recognized the change, he went back to the one who sent him. In that moment, that location of death, Jesus shows up, and he tells them to do something. In the middle of their crisis, there's this clarity. He says, go show the priest. Do you know why he went to the priest? You may or may not know that history, but the priest is the one who could look at the disease and say it was clean. They could pronounce them okay. And that was a big deal, because that meant they could go back to the temple if they needed to. They could go back to the synagogue and be with other believers. It could re-engage them in life. And so he says, go to the priest. They were not cured when Jesus said that. They were still walking dead. And as they went, they were healed. They called out to him, so obviously they thought he could make a difference. They called him Jesus, Master, have pity on us. They'd heard some kind of news, right? And they acted in faith. They called on the one they thought maybe. So they did something very right. When you call on Jesus, you're never going to be wrong, right? And so they did. They called out, and they called him the right name, because he is the Master. And he had mastery over all of their life and all of their death that they were going through. But he gives that strange direction, go. Go and show, before any change had happened, to act in faith. All 10 went. They had group faith. Together they called out to Jesus. Together they called him Master. Together they received the charge. Together they went. Together they were healed. They had group faith. But it came to an individual faith when it got to the point of healing. Once they saw the change, their faith became individual. 9 went on and did what Jesus said to go do, right? They didn't violate Jesus' directives, did they? But 1 stopped and came back. How do you respond when God changes things for you? It'd be the right move. That's another one. What happens if we don't return joy and thankfulness and appreciation to God? Does he take away what he gave us? No. It's not that God is vindictive. It just makes sense to go back where you came from if that's the place where the healing originated. Have you ever had a healing where a change or a solution happened that did not come from God? And if we've never had something that wasn't out of God's blessing and origin, then every time we receive blessing, every time we receive growth, it's a reminder to go back where we came from. And so the one goes back and he gives thanks. Interestingly, the only evidence, the only hint we have in this text suggests that the others weren't thankful. Jesus says was only one able to return thanks. So even though they weren't thankful, he didn't take away what he gave them. Jesus is ever so generous. But the one went back, and he was a Samaritan, right? He was the wrong guy. Know anyone who's the wrong person? Ever been the wrong person? Ever seen the wrong person in the mirror? The wrong person came back. And he didn't use any of the excuses he could have used. He could have used the, I'm a Samaritan, you're a Jew, we don't talk. I'm willing to cry out when I need help, but as soon as the change happens, I'm not going back to you because you're the wrong people, because you think I'm the wrong people. He didn't do that. He didn't also say, well, you know, we've had this 800-year-old disagreement, so we can't associate. He was not hung up on the formalities of being on the different sides of a dividing line. He knew the source of his healing. He went back to a place he never wanted to go back again, because that's where Jesus was. And he praised God loudly. And that's a striking thought. As they went, they were cleansed. One, when he saw he was healed, came back praising God in a loud voice. I've got to tell you, when I was typing this up, I typed that out, praising God, and I had a typo. That's not terribly unusual for me. But this one actually made sense. I was typing, and I typed, he was praising God in a loud void. And he wasn't he? Crowd of 10. They knew to call Jesus Master, but there was no praise after the healing, except for the one. He was praising God in a loud void. Do we live in a loud void? How many places can you go in a day's time and see no praise? Anywhere you want. So what's our job? Praise God, and with a loud voice in the middle of a loud void does make some sense, doesn't it? But wait. We live in a time where we're supposed to be politically sensitive, right? We're supposed to be careful and not offend people with our view of God or with our praise of what's going on in life around.
No, it's not.
Our culture says one thing, our Creator says another. If we are silent, even the rocks will cry out.
From the rooftop.
And the trees of the field will clap their hands. I would rather us cry out in a loud void so we don't have to listen to the rocks. And I'm sure the rock band would be good. But we can still the rocks if we are able to speak into a loud void in our lives around us. And so he praised God loudly and publicly because Jesus changed things. There's a place of humility and a statement of loyalty that this man makes when he goes back to the one who sent him free. Now, Jesus did not take away the healing from the 9. They just missed the rest of the story, because there is more to the story. They go, they're to show themselves. Evidently they did. They were all cleansed. The one comes back. He throws himself at Jesus' feet and thanks him. But then Jesus asks the questions. You ever considered the possibility that Jesus was rude? I mean, if you don't know this story, I want you to pretend for a moment you've never read anything about Jesus before. Okay? I want you to park yourself in a place of ignorance, and I read to you that this one man has thrown himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him, and Jesus says, weren't all 10? Weren't all 10? If you were the one at his feet, would you kind of go, hey, wait a minute, I'm here? And he says, where are the other 9? I'm here. Was no one found to return and give praise to God except for this foreigner? Hey, now come on. I mean, is it possible Jesus was being rude, passionate, or maybe instructive? Jesus sometimes says things, and in polite society we might go, oh, hey, that's not very nice. But think about the questions. First of all, does Jesus ever ask a question that makes no sense? I'm thinking creator of the universe, might have a pretty good head on his shoulders, saves all of mankind, probably has valuable questions. So let's look at his questions. Were not all 10 cleansed? Well, simple answer. Yes, they were. Right? There was no removal of the blessing. Simple question. And I want you to be the leper, be the one, and be at Jesus' feet. You made the right turn. You acted in faith. You headed where he told you, and you looked and you saw your hand was whole. When you opened your garment, you saw that there was no loss of flesh. And you looked at your feet and you saw where there were injuries and stubs, they were whole. And you stopped. And because you could do nothing else, you turned around while the others walked on. And they walked on with the conviction of doing what Jesus said, but you walked on with the conviction to be thankful to him. And you arrive back at him, and you cannot help but throw yourself at his feet. And you are thanking him, and he asks you, were 10 cleansed? Why does that matter? This was your dying, living friend. And you know all 10 were cleansed because you looked and you saw them doing the same thing, right? And you decided to go back. So you know the answer, yes. Everybody was healed. And then he says, where are they? Do you know the answer? You can speculate. You don't know, how long was I on the road, and where was the priest, and have they gotten there yet, or are they still on their way? I don't know where they are, Jesus, but I know I'm here. That's an important question. Was no one found to return to give praise to God except for this form? No. No one else was found. No one was found, because he's the no one, right? No one came back. And the no one came back loudly. And the no one came back thankfully. And no one was truly changed because he was willing. The no one was willing to come back and be different from the everyone. See the difference? And so no one got just a little bit more because he was the wrong person. But he did the right thing. And he came back to Jesus. So no one gets this last piece. After he answers the question, no one found? No one was found. And I am no one. At what point is it important for us to take on that understanding? I'm no one. I am the wrong person. But I'm made right by Jesus. Isn't that the difference for all of us? Isn't that the cataclysmic change in life when we can say, I am the wrong person without Jesus. And I will go to him. And I can still be no one, but he makes me right. And so no one gets found at the feet of Jesus. And then he has to answer the question, yes, no one was found but me. And then Jesus says, rise and go. Your faith has made you well. The word means complete. Do you suppose that his life was perfect except for Hansen's disease? Do you know anyone whose life is perfect except for? Do you know anyone who lives a life of no sin except for this one hurdle they have? do this, no one else can hear what I'm saying, so it's just between you and me, okay? Any sinners in the room? Both hands. We are sinners. And so these 10 get healed of their illness, but there's still other things, right? And because the no one came back and did what everyone else was not aware enough or willing to do, he gets the final healing. Your faith has made you well. There was something else still going on in him that wasn't quite done with, wasn't quite healed. But because he went back to where he didn't ever want to go back to, he can now go forward. He went back to that place where he was a walking dead man, and he walked away well. No one heard, rise and go. Your faith has made you well. My question is, are you no one? Are you willing to be no one so that you will experience what everyone else may miss? Will you be the no one who turns and goes back? Yeah, there's some dark past, right? There's some places of pain and injury and suffering and sin we do not want to go back to. But if we go back and realize this is where Jesus was, and where Jesus gave direction, then I can go back. Because I know from there I can go forward. No one was right. He went forward because he went back. So where'd you come from? And have you been set free? Praise God in a loud voice, with a loud voice. And what else might yet need made whole? And what can Jesus expect to hear from you? Some of us are old enough to remember this commercial. There was a Hallmark commercial a number of years ago. There's two guys working under a sink. And they're talking under the sink, and the one says, "Hey, do you tell your wife you love her?" "Oh, no, I don't say that kind of stuff. I mean, she expects me to say stuff like I love pizza and I love the Steelers, but she doesn't expect me to say like I love you." And then Hallmark says, "Oh, buy the car, spend money with us, and we'll tell your wife how you love her," and that kind of thing. What can Jesus expect to hear from you? Does he expect to hear you say, "Thank you for changing my life"? Should he expect you to come back to him every blessing you see and say, "Thank you, Lord. I'm still at your feet. I'm still no one, but I'm the right one because you made me right." Every blessing, every time you look at the sky and you say, "Wow, nice painting." Every time you hear a baby squall, you say, "That's life." Every time the shoe fits. Every time the stranger smiles. Every time you see the elderly couple holding hands and you go, "That's how it's supposed to be." It's a chance to realize where that comes from and go back to the feet of Jesus. Did Jesus expect all 10 to recognize all that he did? I don't know. But he expected the one who came back to learn the lesson. How good it is to come back to Jesus. Didn't take away the healing, and aren't we glad for that? Amen. He didn't do anything just to get even. They just didn't get everything because they didn't come back. Now, they didn't get to go forward like Noah. But no one did go forward, did he? Will you go like Noah? Would you pray with me? Lord God, thank you for taking people like us. In the scope of human life are known. And thank you for on this particular morning bringing us together and bringing this group together often to share their journey with each other. Lord, you know how many of us have been the wrong person in the wrong place, and that you've aimed us in a new direction. Help us walk that way, but pause along the way to see your son over and over and over again with thanks. And particularly today, we pray for Pastor Mark as he makes a journey of loss, but of celebration. We pray for his sister that she would continue to be a light no matter what happens. Be a light of joy to the people who have been around her. We know that the host of heaven is a joyous place. And someday we all look forward to that. But while we are here, help us celebrate what you do in our lives as the one who truly heals in the middle of pain, who brings clarity in the middle of crisis, and who brings us hope because your mercies are new every morning. It's in your Son, Jesus' name we pray. Amen.